I'm joined here today by Miss Kate Storm, who's part of our PMO team. Yep. Integrated change management is all the rage now internally at RPI. And with that, I give you Kate and myself.
Well, welcome. We're really glad you're here. Thanks for coming to our session. So yeah, we're going to go over the top 5 change management strategies you could use for projects. So let's get started.
Awesome.
So first of all,
you wanna sit or
sure? Yeah, let's go ahead and
sit.
the
screen. Okay.
So first of all, change management in general is really kind of the people side of change. It's basically people that are impacted by your projects. Now here at RPI, we focus on integrated change management because we think that having people integrated into that process from the very launch to the project all the way through to the completion is really important. So the goal really is to engage your employees in this process all the way through. Now, why bother? Why bother to manage change in addition to your technical project? You've got a lot going on. Well, the reason is that ProSci, for example, who's one of the leaders in change management, well, they've conducted benchmarking studies since 1998 with literally thousands of change agents, and they have consistently across surveys gotten employee engagement as one of the key reasons for project success. So they publish a report called the Best Practices in Change Management, and that can tell you a lot about what some of the key points are related to change management, why it matters. But basically, it makes your project about 6 times more likely to be successful if you use change management in it. And it increases your ROI. So you're going to be 5 times more likely to stay on schedule, 2 times more likely to stay on or under budget. And last, it just really closes that gap between your requirements and what you're trying to accomplish with your team's engagement in the project.
I'm very excited about this topic. I'm going to paraphrase Justin Braun, who is the head of our PMO. We all know what a healthy project feels like and one that's not working well, doesn't work like. And we have a lot of tools that we've developed, a lot of project management methodologies, a lot of materials that support an implementation or a large project. But that last missing element is sort of the people, and that's the most important. So we're very excited as we've begun incorporating these into our projects. We've seen some immediate returns. So I'm excited to talk about our tips.
Yeah. So we'll launch right into our tip number 1, which is really that it all starts with communication. So you want to integrate 360 communication into your project right from the get-go. So it's so easy once we start getting going on projects to have one-way communication. There is so much happening that it's real easy to just push information out and forget to stop and get information back. But you do want to take the time to get some feedback from the employees that are going to be affected by this project and make sure that they're on board, that they're with you. There's a rule of 7 in marketing that says essentially that a consumer has to see an ad 7 times in order to remember it. And that's pretty important because in essence, we're kind of marketing our FSM version 11 or other projects to the people in our organizations. So they need to receive that communication. They need to hear about it often. So it's not, you don't want to just kick off and then talk to them 6 months later. You want to keep them engaged throughout the entire project. And you need to do this in some diverse ways. So, 7 emails in a row may not be the thing. If you look there in the middle of the screen, we've got an example of one of the forms of communication we're using right now with the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Group. And what we did is we developed these collaborative e-newsletters that go out monthly to all the people affected by the project. And we've gotten tremendous feedback on these, that it's really keeping everybody in the know and up to date. And we do things like feature some of the team members that are affected and how some quick wins are going so that they can feel good along the way. And very last is you don't want to assume that just because somebody got your communication that it means they agree with what you're doing with the project. I can be sitting there and smiling along with you as we're going through the project and secretly plotting on ways to derail it. So you want to make sure you don't make that assumption that they're on board. So take a moment, let us know, what are some of the communications challenges you have faced in a project? Is there anything that has come up for you that hopefully some of these tips might help solve? or that maybe this, there's other issues that around communication that you need to deal with.
So one of the things I think that's been helpful in this 360 communication is that feedback loop allows us to find opportunities to celebrate successes, those
Absolutely.
quick wins. And a big part of this is sort of building momentum towards your project. Obviously, there are drivers that are making it happen. I will say that I feel like the FSM migration is a very unique opportunity to not just create that feedback loop to create momentum and increase the success of your project, but also to design your global ledger in a way that's going to be beneficial to your system. So when we look at an FSM migration, CloudSuite shares the exact same DNA that Lawson's had for 40 years, but then it adds this new layer of flexibility in terms of how it tracks financial data. And the unique thing about it is when all of us implemented Lawson maybe 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have any Lawson expertise in-house, right? We depended on best practice advice that third parties gave us, and also we had the limitations of the system. But today, if I go into an organization and I identify the right people, they know exactly what the limitations are that they have today, that the reasons they're taking data out and sort of reprocessing that. And there's sort of some key contacts in there, right? So whoever's in charge of your comptroller, whoever's in charge of business intelligence, anybody that does ad hoc reporting throughout the organization, and this could be in HR, even though it's mostly financials, HR or supply management, they have information that can help you get a design that'll greatly simplify their lives. So some of us already know a lot of these pieces, but I think it's still a worthwhile exercise early in an FSM migration project to talk through what this potential impact can be.
Right, absolutely.
Do we have any feedback on the?
Okay.
All right, so no communication issues, or I'll posit the first one is silence.
All right, well, our second change management tip for you is that you don't want to go it alone. So take a minute, and if you want to respond to us, let us know who are the advocates for your projects. So hopefully you have some, executive leadership who is on your side, but in addition, are there people that when you go to them with this idea that you're going to change the software, do an upgrade, that they get more excited than they do apprehensive about the idea of this? Now, you want to activate those advocates. And those are the folks in your organization that, they may be in a leadership position, but they can be anywhere in the organization. Sometimes they're more leaders or influencers in your organization. And you want to look for a diversity in age, the length of time they've been with your organization, just all kinds of things. And you don't always want those people who always speak up in a meeting. There could be somebody who's pretty quiet who may have amazing ideas, and you want to get them going and understand what they're thinking about this change. Out of that, once you have your advocates, you can develop an integrated change management team. You can have a change manager come and kind of help mold or lead that team. And they will be doing things like they'll help develop your 360 communications plan. They'll identify training or coaching needs that you may have in your organization. And they can also help you identify risks, which is really important. They really are your boots on the ground. As much as you'd like to be able to talk to every single person in your organization that's impacted by the change, that's a lot of people. So, you can't necessarily reach everybody all the time. So this change management team becomes, your advocates, the people that understand the project and can speak to it, but then can also listen to that feedback and let you know what's going on so you have time to address concerns before they become serious risks to your project.
I really like the idea of creating these change management teams across different levels of the organization. It also breaks up the feel of it being a top-down thing when they have the opportunity to participate. And I think that we all sort of recognize change agents in any organization we work in or go. So it's probably easy to identify some people on your side. Again, looking at it through the prism of an FSM, and by FSM again I mean CloudSuite Financials and Supply Management migration. CloudSuite is sold as a full solution set. There are many of us in the Lawson community that have certain modules, but not others, like let's say lease management, for example. And so within your organization, there are probably folks that are interested in gaining the functionality of some of these modules. And if you can incorporate that into your migration project, you're likely to be getting yourself an advocate or a change agent or someone that can help you along the way. And those will vary, but maybe somebody's been interested in using Project Ledger to track some activities, or again, an example like lease management. And you don't want to take on too much. That's never the strategy we recommend. But if you can get some wins along the way that will help them, you probably get them over into the advocate side. So I would pay attention to what are the projects that have sort of been listed over the years as of interest, or that people have submitted budgets for, and so forth.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Do we have another survey question for this one? Or?
Well, that was the one about who are the advocates for your project.
Ooh,
so,
all right.
Okay, no answers. All right.
There are no advocates.
No advocates. You are on your own. All right. Well, our change management tip number 3 is resistance is futile, but we need you to expect it anyway. So, take a moment, think about, why do you resist change? Or why have you seen others in your organization resist change? What are some of the issues that you deal with? You have to expect that resistance. Change is hard for people. So just to give you a quick interactive example of that, take your hands and put them together, kind of fold them in front of you, just like you would if you had them on a table in front of you. Take a moment and look and see which of your thumbs is on top, kind of how your fingers are interlaced. Okay, now shake them out. Okay, in a minute I'm going to ask you to put your hands back together, but this time what I want you to do is put the opposite thumb on top. Go ahead. Okay, well, if you're anything like me, that feels kind of weird. So it's just like change. It's a simple thing, and it can even be something that's good for us. But if you're used to always doing stuff the same way, to do it even a little bit different feels really weird. It's uncomfortable. So it takes a while to get through that change. And so that brings us to that point of understanding the resistance. The way to address it is to understand where that resistance comes from. Now, realize it can come from any level of the organization. So, we tend to think of it as something that people in operations may deal with more, but really you can have people in your executive leadership who are resisting it. And so you have to know where you're going to need to address that resistance. We go through resistance and feel resistance for a whole bunch of reasons. I might be the person who developed the current system. I may love my manual processes and I'm not ready to give them up. Or I may just be kind of nervous about, how am I going to learn this new software system? I had a tough time learning the last one. So there's just lots of reasons why people may not be happy about going through this change. So whatever level they're at, you need to treat them as individuals first. Get to know them, start talking, find out where their level of resistance is and what's going on with them. And the last part is, you do want to actively manage that resistance so that you can get through it. So it can be managed, and in fact, the first 2 tips that you've been doing, where you're communicating and you're talking to people, just getting them familiar with the project, those are some of the things that help manage resistance. So how you manage that resistance, though, is critical. You do not want to ignore it. You absolutely want to be proactive about it.
Right. So, you want to dialogue it out. I would say that with FSM, again, it's a very unique type of project. You take, for example, in supply management, there probably won't be much of any operational changes unless you're looking to get those, because the software works the exact same way, right? There's still item locations and vendor items and purchase orders and the requisitioning process. And so from a redesign of that workflow, that won't change. However, the software is built on a new platform, so it feels different. It looks different. It navigates different, right? So I think that strategically, you can manage that change and the resistance to that change by getting those users exposed early and often.
Absolutely.
So we would recommend multiple testing cycles, and the more you can get those users to participate in those testing cycles to touch it. We also recommend formal end user training, right? And sometimes, when you look at this and it's like, well, these functions are going to kind of be the same.
Right.
It's nice hand-holding that I think makes people feel like, hey, they care and they're giving me the support to make sure I'm successful, and I have the reference. So our advice there is early exposure and training as it relates to FSM. Do we have another survey question?
It was, how do we resist change? Why do we resist change?
Yes.
So.
We got a question. How can we identify people who are secretly resisting the project?
who are secretly resisting.
Spies.
That's right. That's where your change management team is really helpful, because what we've found is that they are usually talking to somebody about it. And you're not going to probably be in the room when they are. But if you have these advocates, these people that are spread out throughout the organization, they are often the ones who will tell you, hey, this group over here, they're having a tough time with it. And then you can address it directly. You want to make sure that you're not bringing your change stick to them, but you can definitely be sensitive to where they are and sit down and try to figure out what's going on with them. And that change management team, I think, is really critical to that.
So if I identify someone that's secretly resisting or undermining the change, what's important is not so much the person as the why, right? Like if we can identify the why, then we can broadcast sort of a message to help assuage that change that isn't directed at the specific individual.
Right.
It's just like, well, actually, that's not, sometimes it's misinformation. It's not true that we're all going to have to jump off the building. We'll have a nice little fire escape.
Yes.
So.
And that is often the case we find, is that it's miscommunication that leads to some of that resistance.
So it's identifying what that miscommunication is more than the person. This isn't about persecuting people.
Right.
No,
absolutely.
Another question for you here.
Yeah.
So speaking of jumping off those buildings, the comment was bad. It's more of a comment than a question, but interested to see what you think about this. We find that the current subject matter experts of the various departments are often the best change management advocates within the organization. Any thoughts there?
That's great. Yeah, I think you are going to have natural leaders who are probably able to address change. You just want to have a group, like if you're developing them into a change management team, involve a few other people as well, just to get those different perspectives. It's fine to involve them. If your team leaders are the right people, then absolutely bring them on. Just also look for those influencers, those people who may not be in leadership positions in terms of strata, in terms of title, but who they definitely, people listen to them, because those are the folks that you really want to have on your side.
Yeah, I would say it's twofold. I couldn't agree more. Is usually your SMEs or your super users have a certain personality where they're the vocal people, right? And that's how they probably ended up in that position.
Yep.
But like you said, there's other influencers there that are maybe not the ones that are speaking up in a meeting that you want to try to engage as well.
And even if they're not on your change management team, if you have kind of pockets in your organization, you want to make sure you are reaching out to each of those groups in some way, whether it's with your change management team or whatever, but just don't ignore a whole group, because that is one of the key ways that you start seeing those pockets of resistance.
So I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Do we have a questionnaire or survey or something that we use to identify potential change resistance within the organization?
Yes, there are some tools you can use. We don't have them as part of this today, but absolutely I can talk to you about that. And there are ways you can do some surveys and talk to your teams and try to find out where that's likely to occur.
And that would be part of any engagement. When we say integrated, we look at change as part of the project itself.
Absolutely.
And one of the things we look on early on, especially for larger, more complex projects, is sort of not just identifying the resistance points, but what are the tools that are going to work in this organization? What are the right communication formats? And that has a lot to do with the type of business it is, the culture of that business. So there's a lot of upfront work when you look at that change management piece.
Absolutely.
The diagnostic work.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we good?
Awesome.
Okay. Well, we're going to go to tip number 4, which is change, coaching, and training. So think about, how do you wish your team approached change in an ideal world? Obviously, there's ways. Yes, excitedly, with total enthusiasm. So there are lots of things having to do with this, but one of the ways you can hopefully get your team towards that sort of a view is to know the change you need. Now, you know the technical changes you need along with the software, but again, make sure you're getting that feedback so you understand what the team needs in order to actually embrace the software, embrace the changes you're making. So if you skip over helping your team with some of those change-related skills, the problem is it can lead to a lower adoption rate in the software, and people start developing those workarounds. You can have the system in place, but they're off doing it manually. So you want to make sure you're addressing that with them and keeping them engaged throughout this whole project so that they really are on board. And we can customize change-related trainings so that if we're in your organization, we can find out what those teams need and kind of meet them where they are. Now, in addition, you're going to want a change toolkit. So you're going to need, different teams and different groups may need different things. So for instance, your managers and supervisors, they may need resistance management training more than anything else. Whereas, everybody in operations, or maybe just everybody across the organization, they may need to know how to work collaboratively to develop new work processes that the software is going to give them the opportunity to create. There are times when, something I'm doing in finance is affecting people in supply chain, and, how do we work collaboratively so that this all comes together in a good way? So soft skills are useful, knowing how to communicate, collaborate, be creative. Those are all really good things. And last, this training for change. If you do have this integrated change management team, we can train them. We can do a train the trainer model with them so that, this is going to give you longevity beyond just this one project. So if we go in there and, we're working with you, you've got some great change agents that are being developed. Let's keep them good at it. Let's get them some skills to be able to present some of this training so the next change you go through, you've already got people inside the organization who can stand up and, really help you and help your team get through those changes.
And I would say as far as how this applies to FSM is you want to engage with a services partner that knows FSM and knows change management.
Yeah.
So for change management coaching and training, call RPI.
Sure, absolutely.
And I do want to point out that this is permeated throughout our organization.
Yeah.
Obviously, Kate Storm is our lead charge in this, but our entire PMO is versed on these methods and processes, and all of our consultants have been educated on this because change management occurs at every level during every interaction that we have along the project life cycle. So
Absolutely.
This is sort of an RPI way that we're incorporating.
Okay. So any feedback on how you wish your team approached change?
Excitingly wins one to all.
Absolutely.
There you go.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to our last tip of the day, which is keep changing, or basically create a learning organization. So, when we think about the future of change, you want to think about how are you going to change your future? What do you want your future to be? So change competency, having people know how to go through change effectively, it provides ongoing value. So Moore's Law, for example, tells us that the processing speed of computers is doubling every 18 months. And that is just one example of the exponential rate of change that's occurring in technology. Now, the future of your business, you want to consider how your business is changing in response to that technology and a lot of other things that are happening. So you want that technical skill building, obviously, but you need to combine that with teaching your team to go through change effectively so that you are moving your company forward. Now, even if you aren't, creating flying cars or pizza delivering drones, you still need to be thinking about innovation. So truly innovative companies are out there developing cultures where they're really helping employees feel empowered to think beyond what's been done before, to think out of the box and create innovative new systems, methods, processes, so that they can change effectively into the future. So really, it's change skills for the win. You got soft skills that you need to consider. So in 2016, the World Economic Forum conducted a survey with 350 executives across 9 industries in 15 of the largest global economies. And out of that, they created a report called The Future of Jobs. And what they identified were key skills that employees would need in 2020 to be employable, to really be marketable. And in addition, the Institute for the Future has identified that about 85% of the jobs that are going to exist in about 2030, they haven't even been invented yet. So it's pretty hard to know how to create a future that way. But what we do know, based on all of these reports and everything we've seen with the changes of technology, is, of course you need those technical skills, but you also need these soft skills. And the good news is the same skills that your team would be using right now to adapt to your project, to go through change, to work with each other collaboratively, those are the same changes that the World Economic Forum, the Institute of the Future, and a lot of these other organizations are identifying as key things that you need to know to be able to create the future you want.
So I would say that there's a couple of different things here. I mean, as far as the rate of change increasing, especially in technology, I mean, you can see this in sort of Infor's roadmap.
Absolutely.
And one of the big reasons that they're going towards, cloud-based multi-tenant versus, the current sort of diaspora of different operating systems that they're supporting and infrastructure is so that they can be more nimble in terms of adapting the software to whatever it is in 2030 that organizations are going to need on a more universal level. So strategically, I don't think that happens obviously overnight, but that's definitely the direction. It's a good direction. I think there's a second thing, which is a lot of ERP customers, not just Lawson, implemented in the late 90s, sort of that Y2K was a big driver. And one of the things that we preach for a long time is this concept of continuous improvement. An ERP system isn't something you slam in and forget.
Right.
It's something you have to work on. And we often find that in a lot of organizations, a lot has been left on the table over the last 20 years because they have not invested the time in learning about the new functionality or deploying the new functionality or supporting the organization and getting trained on it. And so to me, this is the most exciting because what we're talking about here is leveraging, in the case of an FSM migration, an FSM migration to make a more permanent cultural change in your organization in the way it views this system and where it fits into your organization's ecosystem. And if I can just cycle back to that CloudSuite containing this full solution set, you should be thinking about not just, I get live, it's like, how do I continue to deploy, identify the functionality that makes sense for me, support it, deploy it. Mostly you could do that internally if you take it piecemeal. And how do I continuously improve how I get information out and distributed and learn the self-service BI and all that stuff. I mean, one of the things we're going to be talking a lot more about CloudSuite financials on Thursday that we're going to be talking about in terms of dimension design is you can always add new ones, right? So we're advising not to add for the sake of adding, but it's there when you come across new stuff. So to me, this is a very exciting opportunity to not just migrate to the newest technology, but change the way that your organization, change the relationship that you have with Lawson.
Absolutely, Okay, well that brings us to the end. So we'll end with my favorite Peter Drucker quote right here. We really look forward to working with you on your FSM version 11 project or any other projects that you're doing and helping your team embrace all the opportunities that this change offers. So if you'd like to reach out to us, we'd love to hear more about your projects or about your experiences with change management. If you want to talk more about change management, we're here. So thank you so much for coming to our webinar.